whatever time it is for you. And I can see it's now top of the hour, so we will kick it off. So yes, glad to have you with us for the next 45 minutes as we show you how to master virtualization monitoring with PRTG. My name is Natalie and I am your host for today. And I'm going to start with some housekeeping. So you may have noticed that you are all muted and your cameras are switched off, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. So you should have the ability to access the emojis, which are somewhere down in your Zoom bar. So feel free to use them anytime to react to what you're seeing. We will also be running a poll later on today to get some of your feedback as well. Thank you for the thumbs up. So that's working. You can also use the Q&A feature down in the bottom there to ask any questions you have throughout. And we have some other people behind the scenes working to respond to those questions throughout today. But we'll also try to make some time at the end to get those questions answered live as well. So the session is going to be recorded and you will receive the recording along with a copy of the presentation afterwards. So don't worry if you miss things or you see links that you didn't write down. You'll be sent the file so you can easily click through to things that you've seen, and we're going to obviously send a follow-up email with everything you need afterwards as well. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to the experts. You can see them here on the screen, Marco and Paul. They work with customers on a daily basis, helping them to get the best out of PRTG. So you're in capable hands with them. And you will see me appear a couple of times. I'll come back online for the poll and towards the end to answer the Q&A. But yeah, I'm going to hand over to the pros now and see you later. Thank you. Handing over to you, Paul.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Natalie, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. So, today's agenda and what we will get out of today's session in this Monitoring Matters webinar. We have 7 areas we are going to cover, of which we'll look at focusing around the monitoring of virtualization environments. We're going to start off, we'll look at common situations, then jumping into hardware monitoring, hypervisor monitoring, OS, application, and additional insights in what you can get in terms of monitoring of virtualized environments. As Natalie suggested, we will have a Q&A session at the end, time permitting. So let's jump straight into it. Common situations. So PRTG is a monitoring solution. So we can monitor all aspects of IT, IoT, and IIoT environments. We cover a number of areas. We can give you the ability to have a single dashboard to monitor all areas of infrastructure, or potentially one dashboard focusing specifically on virtualized environments. This webinar today will focus purely on monitoring virtualization resources. And with our solution, it is very set up. So it's literally a small installation, and then you can actually start monitoring your virtualized environments very quickly with our products. PRTG in daily use. Some of you will already be using PRTG as a monitoring tool. So you'll already be aware of how we capture our information. We do not install any agents on any devices. Instead, we rely on protocols, of which you'll learn a lot more focused on virtualized infrastructures and how we can monitor those with PRTG. You may already be aware of some of our sensors. We have over 300 out of the box, of which you'll see in a bit more detail how we can utilize those for monitoring virtualized environments. So, what are we focusing on today? We are focusing on virtualization environments. So the equipment we're looking at are the hypervisors, the servers, and the virtual switches that are involved in that process as well. Some of the protocols we'll be discussing today are SNMP, SOAP, and some of our flow protocols as well. As I said earlier, PRTG Network Monitor is an agentless tool, so we rely on these protocols to be able to interact with your devices and monitor your devices to get the most out of monitoring for your infrastructure. I'm just going to hand back to Natalie for a quick poll.
Yes, hello, back again. So Melly has launched the poll. You've just seen it appear on your screens. We would like to understand from you what hypervisor do you use in your production environment, and which of those, if any, hopefully all of them, do you monitor with PRTG? Don't want to bias you there, but go ahead. We're going to give you a minute or something to respond to those. And I can see people are already engaging. Excellent. Still moving, so we'll give you a little bit longer to respond. Thank you for your responses. Oh, can we get 100% response rate? This is interesting to watch. Good. Okay, things are starting to slow down. We're at a 76. Oh, we're going up again. Thank you. Can we get, I'm hoping we're going to get 100% response rate here, but we're at 80%. I think that's good enough. Hey, Melly, should we stop the poll now and share the results? I'm talking to Melly in the background. She's helping with running the poll. So I don't know if you should be able to see the results now on screen. But I think this is to be expected, guys. The majority here have VMware in their production environment. We've got Microsoft Hyper-V next and Proxmox. I keep hearing that popping up, and it looks like you're monitoring them too, which is great. So I don't know why you're here, but no, you're going to learn a bit more about how to monitor them, hopefully even better in this session today. So thank you for taking part in that. I'm going to hand back over to the guys as they walk you through, and see you again towards the end. All right.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Natalie, and thank you everyone for responding to the poll as well. Okay, so what is the goal for today's session? Obviously, you've already highlighted the hypervisors that you are using or potentially using and want better visibility of from a monitoring perspective. So the goal of today is help you to expand your monitoring in those areas. So what more you can do when it comes to monitoring a virtualized environment. Hopefully this webinar will inspire you to leverage PRTG to use it more within your virtualization environments and potentially further as well. So let's jump right into it. Hardware monitoring. So as you're aware, when it comes to monitoring of any hypervisor, there is underlying hardware that you may want to monitor or may need visibility of. Why is monitoring physical hardware important? Because essentially what we're doing here, we're monitoring the physical layer of your hypervisor environment. So this is monitoring the physical CPUs, for example, the physical fan trays, physical power supplies to make sure they are operational. If there was a physical fault with them, you want to know before it affects your hypervisor, your OS, and the application that sits on top of that physical hardware. So proactive failure detection is really important. Another area is giving that comprehensive coverage over the monitoring of your hardware infrastructure. So this could be things like the temperature, the speeds of the fans within your servers as well, or maybe the physical drive health. This will again give you a very clear picture of the physical health of your infrastructure. This will allow you to reduce downtime and obviously help your maintenance costs because we know early enough of potential failures within your physical hardware infrastructure. And obviously with PRTG, you've got the centralized reports and dashboarding to give you clear visibility from a hardware perspective as to what is going on. A great example of this is the VMware host hardware status sensor. So Mark will show you this in a second, but essentially what this sensor does, it is a sensor that gives you visibility of the hardware statuses of your hypervisor. This is a specific VMware sensor, but we can use our custom sensors to create one for Hyper-V, Proxmox, or any other hypervisor that you may be utilizing within your infrastructure. What does this actually look like? I'm going to hand over to Marco to show you a couple of things.
Thank you very much, Paul. And also for me, I welcome to this webinar, and I'm just quickly stealing the screen from you And I'm showing you this now in a live scenario where we have set up a PRTG in our own infrastructure, where we have the opportunity to take a little look into the system. As Paul already described during this session, the idea behind this monitoring is that we build up a specific monitoring system with a specific look towards all the components that are being regarded in terms of virtualization monitoring, hypervisor monitoring, with the baseline starting in a physical server direction, which is a baseline monitoring that you should already be looking at or should already be doing, since these hardware servers are the bread and butter for everything you're doing. Everything you have in terms of servers is running on those physical servers. We are able to help you to a certain extent already with these monitoring things because of our partnerships together with different systems and different vendors like Dell, Lenovo, Fujitsu, HPE, where we have set up specific sensors that already help you with the monitoring system. So we're not looking specifically into those options in the physical server department. We are looking more into the virtualization environment. And in terms of the virtualization environment, we're trying to offer you help in every single regard, whatever you have. As we heard, most of the people are looking into VMware settings, into VMware monitoring at this point. So this is one of the major parts we've identified and we've already been working on. As you can see, we offer different options to go into this monitoring and to have a little look into what the possibility behind this one is. And for the beginning, I'm also starting with the VMware we have in here, just to give a little overview of how we could be doing this. As Paul said, we're working on a different level system here. So we're looking at each level or layer independently. The first one we're always looking is the hardware. And this is where we start this one off. And for this total system, we can look at the hardware specifically. If we're looking at the specific ESXi hosts that are in your environment, where we really look into their hardware settings, which are no longer just hardware related information, but hardware related information according to the running OS, which in this time is a hypervisor. So this gives you the opportunity to not just look only at the information that is there from the hardware standpoint, where you can see how the hardware is running, but also take a look, for example, into the specific disks you're using, the production infrastructure you are using, into different memory customs that we have in there, into different settings we have already set up just to see, as well as get the information, for example, directly from your ESXi center to see how the hardware status is on your specific systems regarding to each singular system, as well as looking into the data store that's directly connected to this hardware. So we also have a link directly from your VMware infrastructure over to data settings, which are also hardware dependent settings we can use at each and any point to gain more insights into the system and to gain more looks out of this one. If we're looking into the specific ESXi hosts as well, we also have the opportunities to look at like traffic systems that are working on there to see how the traffic is delegated over this, if we need more power towards the system, which will greatly help you with the distribution and the load systems your ESXi hosts are working on. We can look at the memory, we can look at traffic systems, we can look at disk freeze down there, even change settings or check settings like the productive versions that are in there. So we always up to date and are always able to see the information we have. And this is to be the base layer we are working on right here. We are just checking hardware information, but from the point of view that the real hypervisor is seeing at this point. The same, for example, we can do with the Hyper-V environment. We're jumping into the same boat right here, getting the same information, but not from the hardware itself, but from the point of view of the hypervisor, which in this case is the Hyper-V server, and getting some information like disk systems, CPU, memories, systems that are running, services, maybe even services that are running on there, depending on how much information you would like to gather out of the system. The hardware is the basis we are always looking at first, just to see how many problems do we detect throughout all the system setups, and how many of these different points are maybe impacting my capabilities of working with the system. And with these few informations, back to you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Marco. I will retake control of the screen. So we've just explained from a PRTG perspective or from a monitoring perspective exactly what it would look like for you when it comes to monitoring of the physical hardware from a hypervisor perspective. Just to remind everyone, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A chat for us to respond to. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so hypervisor monitoring, what is possible here? I'm going to jump through different vendors and show you what is possible and how we would monitor them for you. Starting off with the industry leader of VMware. So for those of you who've got VMware already, you will already know that we have sensors built into PRTG to monitor a VMware environment. These use a number of different protocols, the main one being the SOAP protocol, which is the vSphere API, which allows us to pull information around the performance, the hardware statuses from a vCenter server or directly from the hosts themselves. This will give us insights into the virtual machines and data stores that you are monitoring, wants to monitor from your VMware environments. We also utilize WBEM. SNMP is a very common standard as well that can actually allow us to bring in the bandwidth coming into the interface of the hosts, for example. And we can also leverage HTTP or HTTPS to actually interact with a web page from a VMware perspective as well. Hyper-V, similar to VMware. However, in this instance, we'll utilize WMI. So WMI is the Windows Management Instrumentation Protocol that we'll use to interact with the OS to actually interact with the hypervisor there as well. We also have a number of performance counters that we can actually utilize to bring in things like compute, and disk I/O, and network performance as well. If you want to enable SNMP on your Windows OS, SNMP would also be an option here. We can also use WinRM and again HTTPS to actually monitor a Hyper-V environment. Citrix, you'll see today as well. Again, we'll use the SOAP protocol, we'll use SNMP, and we'll also leverage the API from HTTPS perspective as well. Nutanix, the same too, SNMP and HTTPS. Essentially, these have an SNMP daemon, so we can actually use that daemon to actually interact with Nutanix to bring in metrics such as compute, such as VM statistics as well. Proxmox is getting a lot of traction recently. We've seen a lot of tickets coming in around Proxmox and how we can monitor Proxmox environments with PRTG. We can utilize SNMP. So we can use the SNMP daemon agent on the actual Proxmox service to actually bring the compute elements into it. We can utilize scripting. And again, Proxmox does have an API, so we can utilize HTTPS sensors to interact with a Proxmox virtualized environment as well. What this looks like, I will hand over to Marco to show you what is possible here.
Thank you again, Paul. I've taken control from you. And I'm jumping back into my environment just to quickly show you the one thing we're working on now. So we've had the baseline level already done. We're looking at the hardware. We've seen that the physical servers were in a good health condition. We already know how they are working like. And now we're taking the next step. Once again, we're looking at the VMware port at the very beginning because that's where the most of you put your votes into. So the next idea we have now, on top of looking at the hardware we have in the system, we want to know if the virtualization environment itself is available and doing what it should be doing. And for this, we just have to use everything in our arsenal just to take a look at how we would react as a normal user with all the systems we have right now at the get-go. Which means we can use, for example, the vCenter server that is there, just to get all the information we have. So we can use it just to use, for example, a ping to get the information if it's still available, if you can still reach it, if there is a possibility for us to question it and to move on with the next ones. And if we know that it's there, then we can move on and take a look what will be the next step in there. For example, we've decided to go with SSL checks in here just to see if there's a response via the HTTPS website and to see if the security is there and if the certificates are what we used to and what we want to see. as well as having to check if this website itself is loading, which for us is an indication at this very point, just to get an overview, are we there? Can we reach this page and can we go into the systems? And from this on, we can go on. For the vCenter server, for example, we could use the sensors that we have provided via SOAP just to get information about the host performance that is there. So every single host that is part of this vCenter environment can be utilized this way, and we can see if we get valid data from these environments just to see and to determine if all we see is really what we need in there. Is this whole environment working as intended? Are there the right responses we're getting? Are there the right data that is there that we can use just to get towards the point that we want to see in these environments? And then we can jump on further. I already mentioned at that point that we have the vCenter data store that's up there. And that data store that is there to be monitored throughout the system can also be added independently just to get more information out of it, so that we can use the storage information or the free storage information where we can see how much of the storage really is accessible. How much can we use out of this one? How much is the possibility we have in there? This helps us once again determine if not only the hardware part is there, but also the software part that's built upon it is ready to be workable and ready to be worked on, so we can determine if this is what we need and this is what we want at that point. Every single value I've shown you briefly now, as you've seen briefly, can be set up independently for your own enjoyment. So you can set the capacities, you can set the bytes, you can set the pre-space, whatever you want in there as your level where you want to have alerts from, where you want to see that this is no longer usable, that this is no longer what you want. Having those two things, like the vCenter monitoring and the data store monitoring already in the same overview, you can use this to your advantage and determine from this point on if your virtualization is running as it should be running, or if you have to do something, if you need to work on anything. Once again, same goes in these regards for the Hyper-V environment, because there we can also move on a little bit, because we're already a step further. It's a Windows environment and we can use this Windows environment. We are using, for example, in here already checks like service checks. Are those services running? Are those services available? Is the machine responsible? So we can determine also in here if the machine has a problem, if the virtual machine is the problem, if the hypervisor is the problem. We can determine via those checks, the service is running, is everything on the go, is everything as we want it to be. And then we can move on further. Once again, looking into storage systems, into virtual storage systems, where we see the data. Once again, you can grab this data, jump into it the way you want to see how it is going. That's also something we have available for Hyper-V as well as VMware. So there are already things in place that you can use. On top of that, we're always offering different type of protocols, like in this case, SNMP, WMI, but also SSH, HTTPS, as normal transport means and normal protocol means that you could also utilize to get more information out of your systems from the point where you want to go with this information. So a lot of it is up to you to determine and finally tune the settings you want to see to go in depth. Just a quick example for this one. I've talked about an HTTPS center for my vCenter server, which is just a check if the HTTPS web page is there. We also have a different sensor that's called the HTTP advanced sensor, which you could be using here to even go as far as check on the web page itself for certain keywords that must be there, so you can determine that this page is already loaded, or even go as far as use this HTTP advanced to emulate a login into a web page and to see if the web page after the login is loading correctly and how long it will determine or it will take, and help you make the determination if this is a problem or if this is working fine. So this is a chance for you to expand the monitoring capabilities you have even further into the system. And with this information, back to Paul.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Marco. and I will want to explain to you a bit more around what is possible on top of your hypervisors. So obviously you've now got the ability to monitor the physical hardware layer. You've got the ability to monitor the hypervisor layer. Obviously, on top of that, you've got your virtual machines. Your virtual machines will be running some type of operating system, and we can also give you insights into them as well. How do we achieve this? So, most common one is via SNMP. You may already be using this to monitor things like your switches, firewalls, UPSs, and printers. The SNMP is quite a common protocol to monitor the OS level of potentially a Linux machine or potentially a Windows OS as well. So it's totally up to you if you want to actually use SNMP there as well. You can utilize the MIB file as you would normally do with switches and routers to bring in insights into the availability and performance of an operating system. We also support SNMP traps. So we have an extension called Data Hub. They can utilize to bring in SNMP traps or potentially syslogs into PRTG for greater visibility of your OS as well. You may already be aware of a couple of sensors we have. We have the SNMP library, the SNMP custom sensor, and our trap receiver sensor if you want to just utilize PRTG. But like I said, we have Data Hub as an extension that will allow you to bring in additional insights into PRTG as well. Some key metrics when it comes to the monitoring of an OS is things like monitoring the interface, for the amount of traffic going through your operating systems from an OS perspective. Another one could be the compute, and obviously an important one would be your discretization there as well. WMI, again, this is predominantly for a Windows operating system. We have a number of sensors already in this space, looking at the compute as always, looking at the discretization and performance as well. You can see on the right-hand side some key metrics around CPU utilization, memory utilization, storage, and Windows services that can also be monitored as well from a PRTG perspective. Within your operating systems, you'll then have your applications. This is the next area I wanted to share with you. So application monitoring, why this is important. You want to be able to monitor the full stack of your whole infrastructure. So applications, this could be a web page, this could be an API that you're interacting with, for example. So from a web page perspective, we can use our HTTP or HTTPS sensors to verify the availability, the content, the correctness, and security of your websites or web pages. The sensors we have for this are a number of HTTP sensors. We have a HTTP simple sensor, HTTP advanced sensor, HTTP content sensor, and a full web page sensor as well. Some of the metrics we can monitor are things like the availability in terms of the error codes, things like latency, by looking at DNS lookups, for example, and obviously the health of your certificates there as well. REST is another way we can actually interact with your applications. So if your applications have an API that we can interact with, we can use our REST custom sensors or our HTTP sensors to actually interact with your APIs. We can get JSON or XML responses to give you clear visibility of your applications that are running with an API as well. So these sensors are quite powerful when it comes to interacting with your applications as well. One area I wanted to highlight is that when it comes to application monitoring, we do have a number of sensors that can monitor a SQL environment as well. This could be Microsoft SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle, or PostgreSQL as well. The reason why I'm highlighting this for you today is that SQL is a great example of why layering monitoring is important. So SQL, for example, the OS will reserve X amount of compute just for the application of SQL. Now, in reality, the OS may be using 20–30% of that resource, but SQL will reserve 90% of it for you by default. You want to be sure that your hypervisor has enough visibility of how much compute is actually being used. So monitoring the physical CPUs from the host perspective, monitoring the hypervisor compute from a VMware perspective, monitoring the compute from an OS perspective will give you a clear picture of how SQL is monitored and how much compute is actually being used for your environment as well. We can also give you network visibility as well. So for example, in VMware, if you're utilizing distributed vSwitches, they support a flow protocol. PRTG also supports flow protocols such as NetFlow, JFlow, SFlow, and IPFix. They all work in the same way. Essentially, what you can do is you can send your flows from your vSwitches into PRTG to give visibility of what applications are also traversing your virtualized environment as well. We did have a webinar on networking specifically where we spoke about this in a lot more detail. So I'd recommend you go back and watch that webinar as well for greater understanding of how our flow setters work. But from your side, in your hypervisors, you'll send your flows into PRTG and we'll monitor it there for you. How this looks, I'll hand back to Marco.
Once again, thank you very much. And we'll be jumping back into this one now. As a quick overview at this very point, I've jumped into my system once again with the opportunity to take a look at the last or top layer we can move on to right now. What we want to be able to do is, in terms of monitoring hardware at the very bottom level, to go to the hypervisor level, to go then into the OS level to have as much information as possible. A lot of the questions aren't really determining what is a hypervisor point that we can monitor, how can we get a lot of information out of the hypervisors, how can we see if this is all working. A lot of this seems to be going into the direction of how can we get more out of this monitoring system if we want to see specific values in terms of OS capabilities. More than normal, like for example, more than CPU is all being used. So we are giving always the opportunity to monitor systems from multiple point of views. At this very point where we are right now, we can always offer to use the normal monitoring procedures we have in the systems, which is like, for example, for as well as Linux, as well as Windows, SNMP. Additionally, for Linux, we can use SSH. For Windows servers, we have the opportunity to use WMI as a protocol in this very region to get as much information as you can out of it. Another option is specifically in terms of Windows servers would be to use PowerShell as a scripting language. If you've got remote partial access to the systems, you can use and utilize PowerShell as your very much get-to-go system, which has a lot of access in the background, but requires nearly the same amount of configuration as the WMI. So you have a normal monitoring system at the side. If you're not happy with this one, or you have specific needs, or you need to monitor it as much as possible, because it's like the one machine you always want to have online that you have to see in the opportunities to see how much is possible at this very point. You can also jump back, for example, here in the VMware region, where we are offering sensors like, for example, the VMware sensors, which are monitoring virtual machines. This data you can see here is independent data in terms of what you're seeing, considering that this is also a Windows machine. So if I'm monitoring this machine in an SNMP, WMI way, the data I can see here could be totally different than this data is over there. Paul already explained this one with the overhead that, for example, a SQL server is developing on the systems, which could lead to the Windows environment already telling you about at least 30% CPU, at least 50% RAM usage, while the virtual environment doesn't even see this. So this data is there to confirm how much load is there in terms of load that's being pushed to your hypervisor system, to see what is up with the whole system, what is with the hypervisor undergoing it, and how much of this data can you use and utilize for your whole system. This is one of the very important things there, because it's also offering you the opportunity to look into data store data that is already there. We've got the read latency, we've got the write latency therein, and we can see how this system itself performs within the virtual environment without having to open the vCenter and check for this in depth on the system itself. So everything you can see here is the data that a vCenter could offer me, just to see what is being done with it. How much load is being produced? How much is it developing from? So on this level, we can make the next step, not just monitor the hypervisor, not just monitor the host, but get a transition in between the hypervisor and the virtual machine on itself to see from my most important systems that we have there, for all the systems that we are in there, how's the impact for this system? And that may help me then determine how much more can we take on this hypervisor? How much more do we have to move? Do we have to move this at all? Is this something that is an opportunity for me? Can I see how much we have in the system itself? So this offers me more opportunities to set it up, to go into the depths of everything we have in there, just to see how much information is available to me and how much we can use. And on top of this one, we're then setting up with another level, which would be like the application layer, which isn't the real focus topic, but is a nice add-on to see this one, because from now on, we only know if the system is performing, and we don't know if it's performing its actions like it's supposed to, so if it's working in its application. So we can then offer to move on to this one. And for this example, we're going with the PRTG Data Hub. Paul already mentioned it, that we've got this add-on that it's there, where we have got a little bit on further to see if there are possibilities in the system itself to get more and more information out of the system over to PRTG, to see we've got a one in all instance where we can see all the data that's being processed by the system. For example, trap metrics that are in there, IPFix, flow, net flow, all this data that's not even being sent to PRTG directly, but sent to the data hub, which we then can analyze based on the data we have in there, just to see if the data that's being used in the system is the data that should be used, and if we're happy with this data without having to access the system over and over and over again. Same goes for applications like, for example, SQL servers that are there that should be monitored independently, that should be giving you some more information out of this one. Data, app pool data, IIS system data, where we then can make our own ideas over these ones and see how much of this information is available to us and how much of this information do we really want to use in the system. So it's a nice add-on feature we can use on top of all of this to jump deeper into the systems. In the end, this is a possibility to give us a full-on overview that we then can use back as our information system to have a full-on overview and build up our own views at a single level that we then can, for example, offer to clients, for example, to our C-level environment or to the general public in our environment, to show them that everything is working within the normal means and everything in terms of that is being used the way it should be used. I'm with this one. Paul.
Thank you very much, Marco. So I'll share my screen again. Perfect. Okay, so just to recap, like I said, we do have a previous webinar which we looked at network monitoring, and that will also detail how to configure those flow sensors for you as well for your distributed vSwitches within your hypervisor environments. Okay, so digital insights. I also want to show you a bit more about what you can get out of PRTG. So Paessler have developed something called a sensor hub. The sensor hub is a website that you can actually access. It looks like this. What it gives you the ability to do, it gives you the ability to see things that some of our development team have created, some of our support team have created, and also you guys, you've also created some scripts and some sensors to actually monitor different hypervisor environments. So for example, if I jump into all systems and jump down to virtual servers, it will give me a breakdown of a number of scripts that have been created by some by Paessler, some by third parties, to monitor different aspects of a hypervisor environment. So for example, we have information here about the host hardware statuses from a VMware perspective. We have Hyper-V monitoring here, Azure at the bottom here, but here further down, excuse me, you have things around Nutanix, and a bit further down, Citrix here as well. So these sensors in our sensor hub will give you visibility of different hypervisors and how they're configured as well. So if you want to do a bit more when it comes to monitoring via API and you're a little bit stuck, you can come here, look at our sensor hub, actually have a look and see, has this been created already? And if not, what are the steps to create them for yourself as well? We give you the power, we empower you guys to create the sensors, give you visibility around whatever you want to see within your infrastructure. What this looks like that live. Here is a sensor that's been created to give us an overview of our virtual machines in VMware. So it's quite powerful, so you can see things like VM tools. Are they running the latest version? Yes or no? How many virtual machines are powered on? How many virtual machines are powered off? Another example would be the snapshots. Snapshots is a very common feature used in virtualization, and essentially you want to know how big your snapshots are, how old your snapshots are, and also how many snapshots you have. Because this has an impact on your backups, for example. From a Proxmox perspective, we can do exactly the same as well. So with Proxmox, here we're using SNMP to actually bring out the number of VMs that are online and offline. And in addition to that, we're also putting in how many snapshots are on those VMs as well. So essentially, you've got the ability with PRTG via Sensor Hub to create these sensors to give you greater visibility of your hypervisor environments. The key thing here is that all we need is the ability to interact with your hypervisors based on those protocols that we discussed earlier on in the section to give you visibility of your environment there as well. So that brings us on to our Q&A section, of which I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm back to Natalie.
Hi there. Yes, you guys have been very active with your questions, and you may have noticed that some questions, quite a lot of them actually have been answered. So we have some people in the background that you don't see on screen, Jasmine and Henk, who've been responding to your questions behind the scenes. So thank you for that. But we do have some questions now that we would like to go through live with you, and Marco's disappeared, so clearly he doesn't want to answer them live. It's up to you, Paul. But yeah, so where shall we start? There is one at the top. Paul, I don't know if you can see it from Zoltan. The built-in sensors are not able to get detailed vCenter problems. What's detected by the vCenter itself? For example, the server certificate expiry or disk usage of the Photon OS, apologies. I think Paul may have the answer in his brain and I'm just reading it out, but
yeah, okay. So that's a really good question, and that is a good example of where potentially the Sensor Hub add value there. So in our Sensor Hub environment, you've got the ability to see how you can create a script to actually bring in the alarms as well. And in the background, my colleague has actually given me a link. So let me share my screen. And this link is literally just from our knowledge base. So if I just share my screen again, so on knowledge base article, we've got vCenter alarm monitoring. So here you've got the ability to actually review this article to give you insights in terms of how you actually monitor the alarms from a VMware environment. So that should give you greater visibility of your alarms from a VMware perspective. If you need further details, just reach out to us from a support perspective, and we're more than happy to help you there as well.
I've just shared the link to the Sensor Hub as well. Again, I think someone was asking about being able to browse that, and I think Jasmine has responded in the Q&A there. Another question that popped up: will there be a webinar for such great maps creation? So I think you showed a little glimpse of the map capability there in the session, and someone wants to see more of it. So good news. Yes, we will have a focused kind of webinar around that, and anything you have that you want to learn about, please share it with us. You can write to me as feedback what you want to know more about, and we can look into putting something on for you. So that's that one done. There is another question. So can you guys see it in the Q&A? In case auto discovery is performed on an existing object and it scans and adds already existing sensors objects, can auto discovery process be customized in a way to add only new and not existing sensors? Great question.
Very good question. Marco, you want me to take this one? Do you want it?
So during the auto discovery, during the initial setup of the auto discovery, you get an option to change the handling of already known devices. So if you change these settings during this will not discover the devices you've already added within the system. It will only go through the new devices that are being found. So you can use this auto discovery very safely and do not override and do not double up on these things you already have.
Perfect. And with that, I see we are kind of out of time. Somebody else did ask the question, is all of what you've seen today, because I think they're just trialing it, in the commercial version? Yes, it is. So we're only showing things that are available, you know, in the product. Everything's available from what you saw today. So just to give that piece of information. And before we go, I just wanted to make you aware, the next webinar coming up is on September the 10th, and it's all about monitoring physical servers like a pro with Paessler PRTG. So if you're interested in that one, please register now. You can follow that link to register. We will be sending, again, just as a reminder, the slides and the recording. You'll see an email from me in your inbox, as well as the answers to any questions that we may have missed, or actually we'll just be sharing the answers to the questions just so you have them as well to hand. And that's it from us today. So thank you to the presenters. Give them some love in the emojis if you can. And we'll see you again at the next one. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you need to in between that time. All right. Have a good rest of your day, everyone. Thank you, guys.